Welcome back to Markets with May. Today we're going to talk about Harley Davidson, ticker HOG. Harley Davidson was on the Gurula Christmas shopping list, as you can see on my Instagram. And we were in it at 36 level, which is date stamped, and traded out of it around 42 when it crested. And in many ways, this is really more of a recap into this coming earnings season. I definitely want to get you set up so that you can think about how to listen to the earnings call, and also if you still own it, what you might want to do about it. We are going to talk a bit about Harley Davidson in the context of its industry, what's been happening in recent years and why I got intrigued, and then we're going to go through the company financials just a touch. Before we get into that, I wanted to mention that as with all financial media and news, past performance is not indicative of future returns. Additionally, I also want to remind you that this is designed to help you start your research. It's not the end-all be-all, and there may be other resources that disagree with me, but I always show my work. Additionally, Markets with May is the free version of a paid subscription that a lot of folks are a part of. My paid folks get a bunch of other additional things, including live Q&A with me on the daily Monday through Friday. Finally, just like everybody else on the internet, if you would like, share, comment, forward, that would be amazing. Additionally, if you could hit the subscribe button on my YouTube, I would love that. Now, let's talk about Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson is headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which I used to have to travel to quite a lot in my first job. So shout out to all my cheesehead friends in Wisconsin that might be watching this. They are truly an all-American bike. The Harley Davidson is really, in my opinion, a bike like no other. It is big, it is loud, it is stable, and it is designed to be seen. Now, Harley is really beloved in this nation. It really has a lot of branding, both through the stores and as well through the many events that it does, such as Daytona Bike Week. Shout out my Florida friends, as you know. And it is just a fun ride for a lot of folks, albeit a little bit big for my tiny little frame to manage. Interestingly enough, them isn't quite as big overseas. I mean, a lot of folks know this bike, and given the price points, I think it would be considered a luxury item for sure. But the fact is, its market share is significantly slimmer, and also it's not a practical bike if you're in the emerging markets or if you're in a country that gas is super expensive. I'm not saying gas isn't expensive here, but let's just call it what it is. It is a lot more expensive in Europe. Now, Harley Davidson is definitely classified as a turnaround story. Johann Zietz was brought in February, just before COVID, and he did his first call after that first quarter. And I gotta tell you gotta give this man credit. He definitely turned it around, and quite frankly, 1 year turnaround is kind of fast. Super props. Now, Harley Davidson used to be a part of the S&P 500. It got removed in June of last year, and in fairness, I got very lucky because, to be fair, I wasn't giving Zietz any credit to be able to turn this around. Let me tell you what was going on at the company before he came in. Harley had kind of been languishing at that time. They had taken this strategy where they were going to improve their market share in other countries. Kind of makes sense, right? They have this huge, ridiculous, almost 50% market share in the US. They wanted to shoot for 25% market share in their other respective markets. Not necessarily the leader, but since they were at such a low percentage, that seemed like the best way to bring up sales and make it happen. But you know what? It turns out that when you're in foreign markets, there's a lot of extra sauce. So Zietz comes in, COVID's hitting, it's looking really bad, and he's just like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna focus in on the US. I'm gonna close down stuff overseas, I'm gonna close down stuff over here, and we're just gonna kind of focus on our core business and building up the US consumer.
Additionally, he decided to double down on Livewire, an electric vehicle that is pretty much the opposite of Harley, but he felt that that was where the future was going and that they needed to start moving in that direction.
And I was like, into COVID? Are you sure about that? Now, the other thing that I think made what he did so remarkable is because in February, you wouldn't really have known fully what kind of stimulus package was going to happen. And a lot of times when you look at the numbers, it's unclear how much the financing business is very, very relevant and a part of net income. But I was looking at that and thinking about what the credit losses would be in the motorcycle business versus in the auto business and thinking, I don't know about this, Mr. Zietz. I'm not sure that you can do it. And just like everybody else who is unfortunately looking for shorts at all times, I shorted the poor man. At that time, that was the right move given my time horizon, because being removed from the S&P 500 alone is enough to kind of tank the stock a bit. So I got out, I made a little bit, and then I was like, not gonna touch this right now.
Fast forward a year and you're seeing credit losses at 1.2%, which quite frankly is just as good as any really, really healthy commercial bank at this point. Additionally, you're seeing allowances come in far, far below the 5% that they had reserved against. So this is just really, really fantastic results.
So while I'm listening to that call and reviewing the documents, I'm thinking, my goodness, he surely did turn all of this around. And as I'm reviewing the documents, it occurs to me that he really benefited from already being in the process of closing down stores right away. He brought all that inventory in to kind of help things out and cleared it out in the best possible way, given all the supply chain issues that happened. Additionally, while it is true that they have supply chain issues like everybody else, the way they sort is ever so slightly different. And also because their business is primarily US based, the US has done a little bit better on the consumer side. It's a clean, beautiful, pristine quarter. Now, before we get too much farther along, I do want to talk about Livewire. Harley Davidson announced in December that it was going to spin out this electric vehicle division. And a lot of people have a lot of variation of feelings about this. It's an intriguing move, but it's probably the right move, because as an EV vehicle, it probably has access to things that the parent company would not. And the types of things that it might do in the future probably are better off separated from Harley, but still benefiting from the tight, close relationship with Harley Davidson, the very popular and much beloved brand. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about what happens when the company spins out, because a lot of times for folks, they don't realize that they will receive shares of the new company in the ratios that are established post the transaction, so that you're not necessarily losing anything by this company spinning out. So you'll be the shareholder of two companies if you are a shareholder of record on the date that the spin out occurs. Now, the other thing that you kind of want to notice if you're in the options market is that means you'll also have options on both companies. And that can get a little dicey, because the way that the spins work, it can mean that you have like a really uneven number of options, and then the liquidity of that option is a little funky. I've gotten caught up in that one. That's not pleasant, but it is something you want to know. Now, if you're long deep in the money options, you've got other things that just are the nature of options to protect you a little bit. Obviously, you can come to do the conversion for you. Realize, call your broker, have them describe to you the dynamic of what's going on as it becomes very clear what the date is for any kind of deal, if that's how you're doing this one. We're going to go into the financials, but there is this little nuance that I want you to understand about the motor vehicle companies. And quite a lot of them have this aspect that make them different from everything else that's considered consumer discretionary. Now, in a regular consumer discretionary company store where you're going in and buying with a credit card, it might even be something like Whirlpool, where it's like a big, gigantic appliance. Those companies do not have a financing arm. So they do not have essentially a lender or a bank right in the middle of their financial statements that you have to try to understand. Companies like Harley Davidson, Ford, GM, they got a bank inside of them, and you got to just take a look.
Oftentimes it can be a lot easier to see this in the 10K versus in the 10Q, the annual report versus the quarterly report. And that's because there are times when you see almost a loss in the bike business, but the financial services makes up for it. Well, the financial services, you just have to understand, is financing of the bike. And so you're kind of investigating from there. All of the same questions you might have for a bank on how loan losses are, etc., are going to then be very, very relevant. Additionally, the cash flow statement becomes a bit more relevant than even in other companies. And I think what makes it a little bit unique, but absolutely something that you can grow to feel comfortable about, is you'll want to kind of learn a little bit about how to think about origination finance receivables, and also appreciate what's actually happening with the securitization of debt and what that implies for the risk financially to the firm.
In fairness to these companies, they typically do an amazing job of making it super clear what's happening with the lending portion of their business. And Harley Davidson is no exception to that. Now, don't be discouraged by that, because Harley Davidson, like a few others, does an amazing job of splitting out the numbers so that anyone could understand them. And in fact, I would almost say that if you are used to seeing them at Harley Davidson, and later you want to use that skill to start looking at some of the banks, you'll see a lot of the similar things. And it might even be an easier entree into learning some of the financials for the financials companies, which are very painful. But what you'll kind of need to understand is what was the total revenues, so to speak, of the financial portion of the business, and then map it through to the cash flows that are happening to get to a net income number. And then what exactly was that net income number for the year, and also what are the financial receivables to come? And it really is kind of not the most straightforward thing, but once you do that exercise, you'll see that the turnaround in this company is already very much so underway.
Now, at this point, I'm sure a lot of you are like, May, seriously, can't I just use the PE and EBITDA metrics and then look at sales and how that rolls and be very okay with this? And in this case, it's actually okay, but that's really because the credit quality is so good on the financing arm right now. But please, 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 if that's what you're going to do over time, check the financing arm and make sure that it's doing okay.
Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is that because of the deal, I think it is still somewhat smarter to do this through the stock market versus the options market. There are a lot of extra tricks, and if you get the date of shareholders of record wrong, or you just weren't watching to notice that you might have an issue, or your broker didn't send out a notice because maybe it was announced very last minute, it's going to be painful and it's not fun to manage it on the options side. With all consumer products, I think it's really important for you to go into a Harley store, try to get some knowledge firsthand of what's going on, and if you can, ride one of the bikes, especially the Livewire bikes. In fact, Harley Davidson, if you need more women to demonstrate the bike, I am motorcycle licensed. Call me. Buy, sell, or hold, I think it depends on price more than anything else. Now, I think that the spinout is going to be a positive for shareholders, and Zietz has certainly done a lot to turn this company into the right direction and steer it for the future. But we do still have some minor supply chain issues. They are not completely immune to it, so to speak. And according to guidance, they were saying that they are assuming that this will alleviate in the third and fourth quarter. So we kind of have to see what the net impact is to the second quarter before we can truly feel comfortable being extremely bullish. But if we're talking about long-term investment horizon, it does only trade around 8 to 9 times earnings. And while there is a little bit of cloudiness, because you definitely will have some corporate actions that are going to continue to make the numbers look a little bit tricky in the near term, I think given the growth that we're seeing on the top line, and if you were to give Zietz full credit for being able to continue his progress with it, at 8 times, this is one you might want to just own the stock and see what happens. Certainly as we get closer to earnings, I may see where the stock is trading and potentially try to participate via some sort of option structure. Regardless, the market has been so volatile that I think this one is worth putting on your screen, trying to get to know, and then trying to ascertain if there's a price at which you would absolutely be a buyer. Well, that's all I've got for today. As per always, like, share, comment below. If you already own this, I want to know if you are thinking of buying this and there's a price you have in mind, let me know that too. And if you think I'm absolutely missing why this is a short, I want to hear that too, even if I don't agree with you. Till next time, you guys, careful out there in this market. It's super volatile. Bye.